So we are discussing about a typical dual starter. So the essential part of that starter is a coil and contactor arrangements. So I told you how a coil and contactor arrangement will look like. Generally there will be an electromagnet which can move against a spring. And when the coil is not de-energized, this will be in the upward direction, and there are several pair of terminals like 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6, and these are copper strips. So when the coil is not energized, 1 and 2 will remain open, 3 and 4 also will remain open. So they are called normally open contactor. On the other hand, this copper strip, when the coil is not energized, touches 5 and 6. So this pair of terminals are called normally closed contactors, and it is shown like this, NC, 5 and 6. So this is an integral part of a DOL starter. Now we will see how it will look like. Suppose you have got your induction motor supply lines here. This is the input supply. 3 lines are coming. Okay, now in series with these lines, what you do, you have 3 NO contactors. This is NO, this is normally opened. And these 3 goes to supply. This one. These 3 lines go to supply the motor stator. Suppose this is induction motor. So these 3 will go to supply the machine. Okay, as I told you, this must belong to some coil, these 3 NO contactors. So that contactor, there will be a control circuit which is supplied from any 2 lines like this. Supply is tapped and that coil is connected in series with this one. Okay, and there will be a pair of control switches. One will be marked as start and another will be marked as stop. This is the 3-phase supply. Okay, this is a control circuit. So you just see that this coil, when it will be energized, these 3 will be closed. When this coil M is energized, these 3 will be closed, otherwise they are opened. Now suppose you want to start the machine. So what you do, you switch on the supply, main supply you give. But as you can see, your machine will not start. Simply because the coil M is not energized. Why? Because in this circuit, which is called the control circuit of the starter, the coil M remains de-energized. Because there is an open circuit in this loop between these 2 points. Because these 2 points are not closed. Now this switch, you should remember that when I draw a switch like this, it is really a push button switch. Which is not equal to a toggle switch like this. A push button switch only has got a standard one state. By pressing, of course, that is, this is normally open. This push button is normally open. If you press it down, it will touch these 2 points. But the moment you release your hand, it will once again come to the off position. Similarly, this is normally open. This start switch. Similarly, the stop switch is represented in this way, which is also once again push button switch, this one, but it is normally closed. Okay. Therefore, to start the motor, what you have to do? You have to energize this coil M. By energizing this coil M means there is an electromagnet which will pull this armature down, and these are the three normally open contactors. So, if you press this down, coil M will be energized and these three will be now closed, and your machine will get supply. Okay. But what is the problem? Problem is that after starting the motor, this is full voltage starting, DOL starter. So after starting the motor, if you release your hand from the start push button, which is generally marked with green color, you must have seen, if you release your hand, what will happen? This will become opened and M will be de-energized, and once again this will become open. So it looks like if you leave it like this, you have to press it down so long you want the machine to run. But that is not acceptable. So what is done? Another contactor, NO contactor, is connected in parallel with this. These, you remember, are not capacitors, just contactors. The closing or opening of which will be decided by whether this coil M is energized or not. So it will be like this, a parallel thing you put. Then you can see yourself, you press it down, M is energized, this will be closed. You release your hand, M remains energized via this path. Similarly, if you want to stop the machine, you just simply press it down. The stop push button, which is normally closed, you press it down. Your M will be de-energized. If M is de-energized, this, and these three contactors will become open. So machine will stop. So this is used. But now, where is the overload protection taken? Overload protection in case of induction motor starting is taken using some thermal property, thermal relays or sensors are used to protect from overloading. That I will discuss now, from overloading. Now let me tell you what do I mean by it. Suppose you want to start a cage induction motor by supply with full voltage. What protection do you take normally in the lab? You connect fuse wires, is not? You connect fuse wires. You note down what is the rated current of the machine. On that basis, you select the fuse wire and connect at the input side of this one. But in case of induction motor, or for that matter other motors also, the fuse wire protection is not very proper. Why not proper, I am telling you. See, with full voltage starting particularly, you know how much current it will draw. Machine will draw how much current? 8 to 12 times the rated current. So if your fuse wire, suppose the machine rated current is 10 ampere. During starting it takes 80 ampere. Then what fuse rating you will choose? If you connect 10 ampere, then it is likely that when you switch on the supply, during that process, because fuse is quite fast acting and fuse will blow because of no fault in the machine. Only thing, it takes large starting current, that is okay. But your fuse will blow, is not. The other alternative is you connect, knowing this one that it will take some 8 times the full load current, you connect 80 ampere fuse at the input. But then during starting fuse will not blow, but when the machine will be exactly operating in the normal operating condition, if an overload takes place, machine will not be disconnected from the supply. unless it is overloaded to the extent of 80 ampere. Are you getting? So there is some problem here. So what is done? Thermal relays are used to protect the machine. Thermal protection. I should not use it relay. Thermal protection for overloading. Now, what is done? Now, in series with these lines and inside this starter, they will connect 3 heating elements. This I will show it in this way. It is in series. These blue lines are not there. You imagine like this. Just to indicate that it is connected in series in this symbol. And there you write overload. OL. That is, these are heater coil. Small heater resistances are there in series with the lines. Heating coil. Okay. Now, so if the current exceeds a certain value, for every value of current it will be heated up, but it will be heated up largely when large current will flow. That is the idea. But what I want to tell, no matter because of whatever reason overload takes place inside the machine, what ultimately you have to do to disconnect it from the supply? See, automatically machine should be disconnected from the supply. So you have to create an open circuit in this control loop. Somehow you have to create an open circuit in the control loop, which you can do yourself when you wish to stop the machine by pressing the stop button down. But here, by sensing this current through this heating coil, you have to create some movement which should be utilized to create a open circuit in the control loop. This is done in the vicinity of this heating coil. What are placed are called bimetallic strips. Bimetallic strip. Bimetallic strips will be there in the vicinity of this. And this strip will now move because of the heating effect. And that movement will be utilized to create an open circuit here. So that is not generally shown in this diagram. What is shown symbolically is this. In series with this, there will be another contactor connected, which should be normally closed or open. Normally closed, right? This should be normally closed contactor. But the opening and closing of this one is not decided by this coil M. It will be decided by the heating effect of this coil, which are connected in series. Small heating elements are there. So bimetallic strip will have movement, and that movement will be utilized to. So this is normally closed, and you write OL here in order to indicate that these two are same thing. I mean, they operate in tandem. So this is this one. Now, in which way this is better than your fuse protection? See, you now solve several problems. See, these bimetallic strips or heating thermal protection, they generally have large time constant. See, this bimetallic strip will be heated up, then it will start moving like that, is not? But a fuse wire will just, that current is exceeded, within few less than a second it will blow off. But it has got larger time constant, inertia to move. Now that cause and effect relationship is much slower in case of a bimetallic strip sort of thing. Heating effect, it will bend, then it will create an open circuit or short circuit. So if you now close the switch during starting, although the current is large, 80 ampere, machine starts running, your heating effect becomes this one. Bimetallic strips starts responding to that. But immediately after some time current starts decreasing. So before going to open this one, practically it will not move. Are you getting? So your starting problem is over. And second thing is, of course, it will protect you in case of sustained overload is present on the machine. How? Suppose the rated current is 10 ampere. Now suppose the 15 ampere current is now continuously drawn by the motor because the load on the shaft of the machine is such that it should draw 15 ampere, but rated current is 10 ampere. Then what will happen if 15 ampere sustains for quite long time, then your bimetallic strip, although it will take some time, it will go and open this one, disconnecting the machine from the supply. Okay. And this also will protect you. Suppose the machine is drawing some 10 ampere current, rated current it is drawing. See, because of some disturbance on the shaft of the machine, suppose current may sometimes go to 20 ampere, not prolonged 20 ampere, because of some fluctuation in the load torque, etc. here and there. Suppose the current drawn from the machine suddenly becomes say 15-20 ampere. So at that time also it is taken nicely, the care is taken quite efficiently by these thermal relays, in the sense that at that time also when suddenly current becomes 20 ampere, immediately it does not disconnect the machine. That is, this sort of protection will wait before taking some action, as if it will think whether this current is sustaining for a long time, then I should take decision, I should disconnect the motor or I will not. Otherwise, if your fuse wire is there, it will immediately disconnect. Perhaps that sudden rise in current will be lasting for less than a second because of some disturbance on the shaft of the machine. Are you getting? Similarly, this bimetallic strip, which will be in the vicinity of the heating element, this I am just showing here, bimetallic strip, which will be kept in the vicinity of the heating coil. The gap between the heating element and the bimetallic strip can be initially set. Suppose suppose the gap between these two is very small, bimetallic strip and the heating element. Means that what? Bimetallic strip will rather act quickly. So sometimes if the rated current is 10 ampere and you see your production should continue, let us apply some overloading to the tune of say 20%. Suppose 12 ampere current I don't mind, let it flow continuously for half an hour or so. Then you can adjust this gap in order to set the overloading of the machine that you will allow. So there will be generally a disc by which you can change the position of the bimetallic strip with respect to the heater coil in order to set at what current the machine should disconnect from the supply when it draws. This I think you have understood. So, and another protection I told, so this is the overload protection. And another protection I told that a 3-phase induction motor, when it runs on a 3-phase supply, okay, it is running at near about synchronous speed. But what happens is this, if during running condition, if one of the supply fuse blows here, then also machine continues to run. And very close to once again synchronous speed. It is very difficult to distinguish whether the 3-phase induction motor running, one can question is it running as a 3-phase induction motor or a single-phase induction motor. I mean difficult to say just by looking at the motor. Shaft is running like that, you cannot conclude. So if one of the supply fuse, say RYB, blows at the input side, suppose here some fuse must be there at the beginning, whoever is feeding, the B phase is out of service, but RY supply is there. Then machine is supplied with a single phase supply and machine will continue to run. Now in that case also, if the load torque on the shaft of the machine is constant, the power drawn from the input side must remain same, is not? When it was running as a 3-phase induction motor, suppose it was drawing 100 kilowatt at the output. Now when fuse of one phase blows, then also it should draw 100 kilowatt, but it will draw now from a single supply. So the effect will be the rise in the phase currents, and in one phase current will be just 0. So in normal cases, I mean less costly dual starter, these single phase protections are taken care of by overload relay itself. However, one can have a single phase relay uh, to detect such a thing to happen. There are several ways that I will not tell, but tell you the idea. So single phase protection is to be taken. You should not run a 3-phase induction motor on single phase supply. However, you should remember that a 3-phase induction motor, if supplied from single phase supply, will not start at all. Starting will not be there. That will take up when single phase induction motor will study. So this is about the starter. And this why I discussed, you will find in almost all the types of starter, commercial starters available, start delta, this, that, there will be a separate control circuit provided with start, stop, push button and a coil, controlling several contactors. Say now you will be in a position to study any commercial starter used for AC machines. You must look for what is the control circuit of this one and how many contactors it is controlling. So this is a typical starter I just discussed. Now today I will tell you, rather highlight the different methods of speed control and braking of induction motors. Say speed control of induction motor. Just qualitatively I will discuss how speed can be controlled of an induction motor. We have seen that an induction motor operating at rated voltage and frequency has a torque slip characteristics of this kind. This is Ns, this is S equal to 1, that is Nr equal to 0, and this is Nr equal to Ns, and this is torque. Now, the generally full load torque will be at the middle of this linear portion of the curve. So variation of speed from no load to full load is very small in an induction motor. That's why induction motors are called constant speed motors. And this small variation of speed from no load condition to full load condition is of course not speed control. It is not at you are not wishing to change the speed because you are loading, speed has to change. So this is not speed control. You should not be under the impression. The idea is whether the same load torque can be supplied with different speeds. Are you getting? Same load torque I will supply, but machine will run at different RPM, whether it is possible. Tell me, suggest me a method. Rotor resistance you can connect. So voltage you can decrease. So there are several methods. See, one is by controlling the supply voltage control. Then if it is a wound rotor induction motor, it is rotor resistance control. However, only for this rotor resistance control only for slip ring machine, not for cage, only for slip ring machine. And this method will work in this way because suppose if you increase the rotor resistance, you will get a torque slip curve like this. So for the same full load torque, machine will now run at this speed. Further increase the rotor resistance. It will now run at this speed. Stable zone is now spanning almost from 0 to synchronous speed. And further increase. So the speed can be varied over a wide range and smoothly. So this method can be employed for smooth control of speed, smooth control of speed, starting from standstill to full load speed. However, this method, what is the demerit of this method? power loss will be taking place in the rotor. So that is why this method, although very easy to carry out to control the speed, is not adopted, because in the rotor circuit there will be enough power loss. Now voltage control method. Voltage control method, this is the torque slip characteristic. Suppose this is at rated voltage and this is the load torque I want to supply. So here this is the first speed at rated condition, rated voltage. Suppose you reduce the voltage, machine will now run at this speed. So this speed, this speed. Further you reduce the voltage, you can run at this speed. But as you can immediately see, the range of variation of speed is not very high. Because of what? Further decrement in voltage may pull down your torque slip characteristics below the load torque itself, and machine will come to stop. Machine cannot develop enough torque because the peak value of the torque decreases in the ratio of the square of the voltages. If you make voltage up, peak torque will increase to 1/4. It's not V square, it is proportional to. Although in a very limited, smooth control of speed, smooth control, but in a very limited zone, in a very limited range. And this method, of course, can be applied both to cage and slip ring induction motor, because it is the stator voltage applicable to both cage and slip ring machine. Can be applied. And this method is applicable only to slip ring machine, This can be applied. Okay, now apart from this, another method is the method of by varying frequency, by varying supply frequency. Okay, now this method comes from this fact that synchronous speed of an induction motor is given by 2F by P, so much of RPS. The whole idea is, if you vary the supply frequency at which machine operates, synchronous speed will vary. But rotor will only rotate at a speed just below synchronous speed. Getting? Suppose 4-pole machine, P equal to 4. Normal frequency is 50 Hertz. Synchronous speed is 1500 RPM. So you know machine will run very close to 1500 RPM, just below it. Say 1440 RPM, like that. Now suppose the same 4-pole machine, but frequency is made up 25 Hertz. What will happen to synchronous speed? 750 RPM. And machine will now run just below 750 RPM. Are you getting? Therefore, by controlling the frequency, you can control the synchronous speed, hence the rotor speed. Are you getting? But one should be very careful about while varying the frequency. Tell me what you know. Flux level in the core, you must see it is held constant. Otherwise, it will become saturated. So, while varying this frequency, so this method is you vary the supply frequency. So, vary while varying supply frequency, you must see that that the V by F ratio remains constant. Otherwise, it will draw large magnetizing current, saturating the machine. So, this condition must be fulfilled. Now, earlier it was supplied from another alternator where you can control both the generated voltage magnitude as well as supply frequency. Those who have done the transformer core loss separation test, they know. So, such an alternator can be utilized to feed the induction motor. But it becomes quite, costly method. You have to buy another alternator, another this, that thing. But in the modern day, because of the advent of several high powered electronic devices like thyristors, MOSFET switches, this is actually fed from an inverter. You have AC 50 Hz supply. In block diagram it will be like this. You have AC supply 50 Hz. You first convert it to DC. Use a converter, that is rectifier unit. Make it DC. Then you have your bridge inverter to give you AC output voltage of variable frequency, variable voltage, and that will be fed to your induction motor. So you will have several control here in the inverter: the frequency control and voltage control. Frequency control and voltage control. So nowadays induction motor speed control by varying the frequency is invariably done using a inverter supplying the induction motor. Okay. That the several blocks in detail you will study in your power electronics courses. But this is the idea. What I am trying to tell you, vary the supply frequency. Of course, supply frequency, as you know, you cannot be varied in the higher range. That is, suppose 50 Hz machine, you cannot go on increasing the frequency in order to run it at higher and higher speed. Because of the simple reason, then the reactances value will become too large. Voltage drop will be sufficiently high like that. Now, one thing I would like to tell about this frequency method, that if you look at the expression of the torque, which you wrote it like this: K S alpha by S square plus alpha square, where K is, if I remember, it is 3 V square, V1 square, 2 pi Ns into X2 dashed. It was there. With neglect of stator impedance. Stator impedance, if you neglect, this is the case. Now, if you vary the frequency, keeping V by F constant, what do you think about T max? Are you getting? What we are doing, see, this one can be written as it is proportional to V1 by F whole square, what I am trying to tell, into S alpha by S square plus alpha square. Why? Because Ns means there is one F. Pns by 2 equal to F. Ns you can express in terms of F. And this x2 dash will give you another F. So F square will come below. On the top, V1 squared. So what happens if you vary the frequency, the Tmax value will remain constant, and your torque slip characteristics as you go on varying the speed of the induction motor will be like this. Here I am plotting in terms of, say, speed. See, speed. So if you decrease frequency, your synchronous speed will come somewhere here, and torque slip characteristics will be like this. See, this is at supply frequency F, this is at F1, such that F1 is less than F. Further reduce the frequency. This is suppose F2, which is less than F1, like that. So Tmax will remain practically constant. But I have put this axis as speed. This exceeds this time because there will be a confusion about slip. I have put speed. So this will be, suppose first synchronous speed is ns1, ns2 like this, ns3 like this. Anyway, what I am trying to tell, the pull out torque or maximum torque will remain practically constant even if you adopt frequency method. But this is of course strictly not correct, because at lower frequency, when you come to lower frequency, the stator resistance may be high compared to your X2 dashed. Then there will be extra drop taking place in the supply line, and your this peak constancy of the peak at the lower voltage may suffer a bit. It will in a very low frequency range, this peak may not remain constant at that value, because I have assumed neglected stator impedance altogether, is not? That stator impedance drop, resistance drop particularly, will become appreciable compared to that, and your this Tmax may suffer a loss at lower speed, lower operation of speed. But the important thing is, by frequency variation, it is also a smooth control of speed over a wide range, and obviously below the rated speed of the machine. In the lower range of frequency, you plot. Okay. As I told you, the synchronous speed, so this is variation of speed by varying frequency. So this method you write, it is smooth control over wide range, and applicable to both cage and squirrel cage. Applicable to both cage and slip ring machine. The another thing I will point out once again, that is this equation, that ns you have written is equal to 2f by p. So synchronous speed can also be changed by varying the number of poles. If the number of poles of the machine could be somehow changed, then synchronous speed could be varied, and hence the rotor speed. So this method is called by pole changing method. Speed control by changing number of poles, of the machine, of the motor. Now this may sound rather ambiguous, how to change the number of poles of the machine, because the machine has been wound for a definite number of poles, say 4 pole, 2 pole, care is to be taken now while winding. But I will show you it can be done rather easily. But one thing must be clear, this pole changing method can be done, this speed control which will result will be not a smooth type, because only in discrete values it can change. It's not 2 poles, 4 poles, like that. Now to understand how number of poles can be changed in an induction motor, I will examine the basic winding diagram. But before that, you tell me whether this method can be applicable for both slip ring and cage induction motor. Only cage induction motor, applicable only to cage induction motor. Applicable only to cage induction motor. Now first, this once again can be done by two methods. This pole changing can be done by two methods. One is called the first idea is, suppose you have got the stator. You have wound for a 4-pole machine, one set of 3-phase winding. Now in the slots of the stator winding, you place virtually two separate windings. One you wind for 4 poles, another you wind for say 2 poles, and you use one set of winding at a time. Your rotor is cage rotor all the time. Are you getting? That is, use separate windings. This is one of the simplest solution. Okay. So suppose use separate set of windings, set of 3-phase windings. In the stator slots. One set corresponding say P poles, the other set corresponding say P by 2 poles, like this. And at a given time, one set of winding will be energized. Okay, this is suppose this winding, one half of this slot is utilized. You are getting the point, what I am trying to tell. But this is certainly not a very efficient method, because your half of this slot space will always remain underutilized at a given time. You could put conductors here also to produce more torque or more flux, more voltage, like that. Therefore, this is definitely a way out, but is certainly not acceptable, because of the fact your slot utilization is not proper, because at a given time only one set will remain energized. Other coils will not carry any current, they will remain idle, like that. Okay, this is cage induction motor. And of course, that it can be applied only to cage induction motor. One can say that in the rotor also, suppose if you use 2 sets of windings in the same slots, one winding will remain energized at a given time. This can be done. See, for production of steady electromagnetic torques, number of poles produced by stator and rotor should be equal. So another alternative is, if you really want to do it for a slip ring induction motor, so both stator and rotor you use a pair of coils, set of coils, P pole, P by 2, P by 2. But the cost of the machines will become tremendously high. And on the rotor, to access those terminals, you have to have at least 6 slip ring and brushes for one set of winding, like that. So that is not done. So these are not very popular method of control of speed by changing number of poles we are discussing. But the other method is certainly very popular. That is called the consequent pole technique method. Consequent pole technique. This method is interesting, because what it does basically, it uses the same winding which has been known for say 4 pole to produce 2 poles by changing some connections. How it is done? The idea is very simple. You may refer to the this diagram where I drew the 3-phase winding diagram. See, for P equal to 4, it was drawn like this. For R phase, suppose this is R1. Where was R2? R2 was here. It is a 4 pole. You have wound the machine for 4 pole, let us assume. So R1, R2 was there. There was another R phase coil. Where from? It was here, R1, and this was R2. Is not? These 2 coils were connected in series, R1, R2, and this is R1, R2, and you pass current. To know how many poles a machine produces, you have to only concentrate on a single phase. Other phases will similarly identical, only shifted by 120 degrees. So if you pass current like this, how many poles it will produce? This is cross, R2 is the return dot, R1 is cross, this is dot. So this I explained earlier also, but let me draw so that nothing is missed. This way. This is dot. Similarly, this one. So this suppose produces north pole, lines of force coming out. This is south, this is north, this is south. So 4 poles are produced. Okay. Now what we will do, so this machine has been wound with the understanding that it is a 4-pole machine. Like that we have wound the machine. Now what I will do is this connection R1, R2, and this is small r1, r2, it is present in the machine. But suppose I will connect them in series in this fashion. Suppose we will connect them in series in this fashion. Then let us see what is happening. This is R1. These positions I cannot change. They are in the slots. I will not be able to do anything with their positions. They are fixed, R1, R2. But what I have done, while connecting them in series, I have connected in this fashion. And considered this to be your R phase winding. Then suppose you pass current. So current enters through R1, comes out to R2. But current once again enters through R2, that is, this is cross, and comes out from R1. Now as you can see, these two can be grouped together, so that this will be like this, and these two can be grouped together, so that it will. So how many poles are produced now? 2 poles. This is north, this is south. And this I will do for all the remaining phase also. See, Y phase, 2 sets of coils are there. B phase, 2 sets of coils are there. So for all of them, I will do these connections. So this method does not require another separate windings. But what you require is this. For R phase, whatever is the number of coils, all those terminals must be available to you externally. There you do the switching in the, as if on the machine terminals, not only 2 terminals will come out for R phase. For each coil of R phase, 2 terminals will come out, and you connect them either for P pole or for P by 2 poles machine. So this method is called consequent pole technique, where the rotor will be cage type, and you can change the number of poles and can get the stepped speed control. Suppose if it is a 4-pole machine, it can be run at 1500 RPM or at close to 3000 RPM. Anyway, I stop today. Next